Her ring on my nightstand. The ring on my nightstand didn't belong to my wife. It was heavier than I expected, a clean circle of platinum with a shallow crescent worn into the band where skin had worried it during difficult decisions. When the morning threw its first light across the room, the ring caught it and tossed it onto the ceiling in a wavering halo. I watched that bright oval for a long time before I reached out and touched the metal. It was cool, then warm, like it was deciding whether it wanted to belong here. You will ask whose ring it was, how it found the quiet geography between my wallet and a glass of water, and what I did next. I'll answer, but the story starts before the ring, on a night when the city was damp and generous, and a woman walked into my studio with a red umbrella that beaded rain like pearls. I'm an architectural photographer by trade, a patient hunter of symmetry and weather. My studio lives on the second floor of a narrow brick building that looks across a cobbled courtyard at a row of glossy new condos. I keep odd hours because light keeps odd hours, and because I've always liked the feeling of working when everyone else is busy proving things to one another. My wife, Leela, is better at day shifts. She sells ideas for a living, public relations for a firm that believes a good tagline can baptize a sin. We used to meet for lunch and eat across from each other like conspirators. Lately, our calendars held hands less often. She started Pilates at noon and came home clean and quiet. I started zooming in on my reflection in windows and asking it questions. That night, I just finished editing a set of twilight shots of a glass tower that pretended to be shy by reflecting the sky. I was pouring the last of the coffee when the doorbell stuttered. It was past 10, the hour when couriers go home and friends text instead of visiting. I buzzed and a woman climbed the stairs, her raincoat tied neatly, her red umbrella folded but still dripping, like it had more to say. "Are you Daniel?" she asked, though my name was on the frosted glass in letters a client once insisted were confident but approachable. Her voice had a low, steady pitch, a note people choose when they want to be believed. "I am," I said, "and you're lost or deliberate." "Deliberate," she said, stepping inside as if we had this scheduled. "I'm Sierra." She set the umbrella in the corner, the fabric a small red moon. Water ticked onto the concrete like a slow metronome. I tried not to notice how the collar of her coat framed her throat, where one drop of rain hesitated, changed its mind, and slid toward the hollow above her sternum. "I need a photographer," she said. "Tonight, now, and I need him not to ask too many questions before we start." "I like being needed," I said, because humor is cheap armor, "but we'll pretend I'm a professional and ask one question. What am I photographing?" She tipped her chin toward the windows that faced the new condos. "The penthouse with the bronze planters," she said. "Top floor, third balcony from the left. I want the truth from out here where I can still breathe." It was the sort of thing people say when they have money and despair. I went to the window anyway and lifted the blinds with 2 fingers. Across the courtyard, that balcony glowed like a confident smile. A patio heater stood lit, a single flame behind frosted glass, human fire in a field of electric stars. The sliding door was half open. A red umbrella like the one in my corner leaned against the railing, as if umbrellas communicated like gulls and followed each other home. "Is that yours?" I asked, because it was easier than asking the real question. "Hers," Sierra said. "She likes to match the weather." "The subject of the photos is a woman." "A woman and a man who officially are at a charity dinner downtown," she said. She folded her hands then, not in prayer but in calculation, like a person knitting a life back together without a pattern. "He's my husband, she's, well, we'll find out." I felt my shoulders straighten on their own. I've tripped into 1,000 domestic storms through my lens, but usually by accident, an argument caught in a reflection, a kiss in a lobby that was supposed to be about lighting fixtures. This was intentional. I looked at Sierra's face to see if she was trying to hire me for vengeance. She looked back like someone who needed a witness more than a weapon. "You can say no," she added. "I'll go stand in the rain and figure it out another way." "I'll take the job," I said, "but I won't take money tonight. Consider it a favor to the truth." "Then I owe you more than money," she said. Her mouth smiled the kind of smile that knows exactly what it's doing and refuses to apologize. I sat up quickly because hesitation is its own kind of lie. I slid my tripod legs between a stack of art books and the rubber plant I keep for the illusion of domesticity. I mounted a long lens and fitted the camera with a hood to keep the rain from turning my diligence into watercolor. Sierra stepped beside me, close enough that I could smell a clean citrus that made the air behind my teeth feel sharper. "Do you do this often?" she asked. "Make pictures of people who don't know they're being examined?" "I make pictures of buildings," I said. "Buildings are easier to indict. They don't cry. They either hold together or they don't." "And people?" she asked softly. "They hold until they don't," I said. "But sometimes you can see the cracks coming if you know where to stand." We stood. The balcony across the way existed in the cool privilege of expensive light. At 10:18, the slider whispered, and a woman stepped out in a black dress that ended where the night began. Her hair was the kind of blonde that only happens in cities that can afford it. She did something careless with her wrist and her bracelet caught the flame. Moments later, a man joined her, taller than the shadow he threw, the kind of tailored that makes other men work on their posture. He put a hand on the small of her back the way a person claims a seat in a crowded bar. Sierra didn't speak. She didn't need to. The lens did its job, impartial and hungry. The first kiss was swift enough to be denied by people who like that sort of theater. The second obliterated that option. I squeezed the shutter and let the camera absorb the sound of a marriage not mine. In the reflection on the glass, I caught a face I knew so intimately I wanted to apologize to the room. Leela. My Leela, smiling the smile she uses when a project is finally going her way. My hands stayed steady because years of making do had trained them. The rest of me was a failing power grid. Lights flickering, circuits popping, an old transformer giving up with a sigh. I dropped my eye from the viewfinder and met Sierra's gaze. She had that composure some women wear like armor, beautiful, functional, designed to deflect. It had hairline fractures now. "Adrian," she said, nomming her husband as if the name itself might turn around and deny it. "He always said the penthouse was a temporary pied-à-terre for entertaining." I didn't ask who needed to be entertained. I went back to the camera because it was easier than going anywhere else. They moved inside, deeper than my lens could go. I shot the balcony anyway. The heater's flame bending, the umbrella watching like a sentinel, the empty chairs that had nothing to be ashamed of. Sierra pressed a knuckle to her lip like it could keep a secret from escaping. "I won't chase fireworks," she said after a long minute. "I won't be that person who storms in and becomes the worst version of herself, but I need something more than pixels." "Tomorrow," I said, "we'll meet them where they can't pretend not to see us." She nodded, and then she did something unexpected. She unbuttoned her raincoat, slow, deliberate, the way you unwrap a gift you're not sure you deserve. Under the coat she wore a silk blouse the color of mercy and a skirt that did nothing to hide the fact that she'd been built to make elevators pause. She peeled off the coat and draped it over the radiator. The blouse had a single missing button near the collarbone, and through that small absence I could see the line where her skin warmed into shadow. "I need to borrow your sink," she said, with more practicality than flirtation, and disappeared behind the screen that hides my stubborn plumbing. I heard water, I heard the sigh of someone who had kept a brave face on too long. When she came back, her eyes glistened but not with defeat. She looked at the sofa, then at me. "I can get a car," she said, "or I can sit there until I can walk without thinking about which way I'm walking." "You can sit," I said, "because there are permissions in this world that cost us nothing and save us everything." I made tea because we both needed our hands occupied. We sat on opposite ends of the sofa like a truce. We talked about nothing for 10 minutes, the tiles in the courtyard that never dry, the feral cat that looks like an old detective and uses my windowsill to judge the neighborhood. When silence settled its weight between us, she inched closer. Not predatory, not accidental, two people moving toward warmth because they were cold. "I'm not this woman," she said, close enough now that I could see the shallow crescent of a scar along her jaw, barely there, a history that didn't ask to be explained. "The one who needs to be touched to prove she isn't invisible. But I'm here and I'm shaking and you're human." "I am painfully, stupidly human," I said. I let my hand rest on the back of the sofa, not on her, and let her decide. She leaned into my arm as if into a question she'd already answered. The scent of her hair was something green and faintly sweet. Her fingers toyed with her wedding ring, turning it, as if it were a combination lock that might open a better version of the night. She took the ring off. The sound it made against the glass of my nightstand later was small and absolute. No sex followed it, no clothes in a rebellious heap, no urgent choreography we'd have to deny in the morning. We lay down on top of the bed covers, shoes off, side by side, and spoke until the city grew tired of overhearing us. She told me about Adrian's jokes that everyone laughed at because he was the boss. I told her about Leela's optimism, militant and beautiful, how it had moved furniture inside me I thought was bolted down. Sierra's hand found mine, fingers interlaced, a fit so ordinary it felt like blasphemy. We fell asleep like that. I woke before dawn, the light soft as a promise. I watched the ring catch it, watched the halo on the ceiling tremble. I left Sierra sleeping and made coffee that tasted like clarity. When she woke, she buttoned her coat and thanked me in a voice that sounded like someone had ironed the wrinkles out of the night. She picked up the ring, weighed it, and put it back on my nightstand. "Keep it for now," she said. "Not as a pledge, as a reminder. If I take it with me, I'll start making speeches to myself. I don't want speeches, I want the truth you promised me." We met them that evening at a rooftop bar the color of money. Sierra texted Adrian that she wanted to toast to the next chapter, which he interpreted as a promotion, because that's what men like Adrian hear when women say anything nice. I asked Leela to meet me, somewhere with a view, and she sent back a heart and a winking emoji that tasted like metal. The wind was in a good mood. The city poured itself into our glasses and made us brave. Adrian arrived first, expensive and cheerful, kissed Sierra's cheek and mine by mistake, the way charismatic men do when they're in rooms with reflective surfaces. Leela came minutes later, hair pinned up with the kind of care that says I still care what you think of me. She took my hand, squeezed it once, and I felt my decade demonstrate itself like a slideshow. We kept the small talk until the waiter left us to our ruin. I put the photos on the table between the olives and the pretty napkins. Sierra didn't look at Adrian when she pushed one print toward him. She looked at me instead, steady, the way you look at the person reading a verdict so they don't have to read alone. He blinked twice. Leela breathed in like a diver. The city did what cities do, kept being magnificent in the middle of a private collapse. Adrian tried humor first. "My God, look at that heater, we should invest." When that didn't work, he tried sincerity like a borrowed suit. "It was a mistake," he said, "a one-time misunderstanding." "Your mouth is still shiny with it," Sierra said, Not loud, not cruel, just accurate. He touched his lips as if truth had texture. Leela's eyes went liquid. She reached for my hand and missed by an inch. "I didn't want to hurt you," she said, which is a sentence that has hurt more people than knives. I felt unseen. This wasn't about you. It was about me. "That's the trouble with mirrors," I said. "They rarely reflect anyone else." She asked for openness then, with the bravery of someone who arrives late to a movement and asks for applause anyway. "We could make rules," she said. "We could try, a wider definition." "I want a smaller definition," I said. "One where a promise is a room you stay in when the weather is bad." Conversation is generous, but paperwork is hungry. Weeks after, there were signatures and boxes and the ceremony of the mundane, which is how marriages often end when no one is throwing dishes. Leela moved into a place with white walls and a landlord who smiled too much. Adrian took his ring off and put it in his pocket like spare change. Sierra and I didn't sprint into each other's arms. We walked, like people who knew ankles could twist. We met for coffee in the late afternoons when the city was too tired to lie. We sat on park benches that had names carved into them by teenagers who were braver than they realized. We learned one another's edges gently. The first time I reached to tuck a strand of hair behind her ear, she closed her eyes like a person standing in sunlight for the first time after a long winter. Our kisses were less explosions than eclipses, soft overlaps, a pause in the noise where the world lined up and made sense. We didn't undress each other that first month. We traced wrists and kissed throats and left buttons imagined rather than unfastened. Desire, I learned, can be articulate without shouting. One evening, rain remembered the city again. I texted Sierra a single umbrella emoji. She replied with a red heart and no words. She arrived at my studio minutes later, carrying the same red umbrella from that first night. It bloomed open on my balcony like a flower that has decided to be bold. We stood under it, our shoulders touching, watching the courtyard shine with the effort of being beautiful. She took the ring from my nightstand and turned it in her fingers once, then set it down again with a little ceremony that felt like closure instead of surrender. "I'm ready to be partial," she said, smiling into my collar, "the good kind of partial, the kind that chooses and chooses again. No more truth in secret, the honest kind with windows and lights and us." I slid my palm along her jaw, felt the barely there scar, and kissed her like we had time because we did. The rain thinned, the courtyard breathed, and across the way a patio heater ignited, a small, stubborn sun. It lit the red umbrella from beneath and turned us the color of a ripe promise. The ring stayed on my nightstand that night, quiet and generous. It caught the dawn again and painted a trembling halo on the ceiling. I lay there and watched it with Sierra asleep against my shoulder, her breath a steady tide. I thought about how objects keep stories when we forget them, and how sometimes the only way forward is to look straight at what you were afraid to see and let the light do what it does best.